ice, ghosts, and murder.
On a sunlit afternoon, in the pleasant neighborhoods of Toronto, with the sound of lawnmowers and children's laughter in the background, the idea of ghosts, specters, and hauntings carries almost no weight at all. But at night, as if by design, what seemed comfortable and familiar in daylight becomes strange, unknown, and ominous in the dark. This is how Bay and Grenville looks now. It's a busy intersection in the heart of Toronto. Pretty hard to imagine anything out of the ordinary here. But let's go back 44 years to 1939. The Bay and College bookstore used to be on this corner. It was operated by a woman named Young. She lived with her daughter and son-in-law and her granddaughter in the apartment upstairs. They were hardly moved in when they discovered the kitchen had a few extras they hadn't counted on.
What you up to, Kathy?
Nothing.
Want to help me with the laundry?
Okay. Mom.
Mm-hmm.
Mom.
What? What is it?
Tell Mr. Murphy to go away.
Who?
Mr. Murphy. I don't like him. He keeps looking at me.
Who's Mr. Murphy? What's that doing on? Did you turn that stove on? Then who did?
Mr. Murphy.
You and your imagination. I don't know, Kathy. Sometimes I wish you'd just stick to your crayons. Mr. Murphy?
Mm-hmm.
In the weeks that followed, they found the gas tap turned on several times. Small objects vanished, and they heard strange noises coming from the ceiling. Raccoons, they decided, had nested in the attic. And that seemed like a reasonable explanation, until one night, a few weeks later. They moved in the fall of that year because business was failing. Under normal circumstances, their experiences in the Old Bay and Grenville kitchen would have faded from their memories. But that was not to be the case. The following year, they learned that the apartment had been occupied for a long time by an elderly couple. They must have been very devoted to each other. According to the story, when the old woman passed away, her husband became lonely and despondent. He took his own life rather than go on living without her. The fact that he committed suicide by turning on the gas tap in the kitchen seems a little harder to dismiss, doesn't it? The Mackenzie homestead, 82 Bond Street, a stone's throw from St. Michael's Hospital in downtown Toronto. If you squint your eyes just so, you can block out the city skyline and surrounding buildings and almost enter the last century. In the late summer of 1861, the firebrand, William Lyon Mackenzie, first mayor of Toronto, centerpiece of the rebellion in 1837, which bore his name, died here. It's a museum now, open daily for guided tours. Once there were live-in caretakers, but they moved. They heard hollow rumblings on the second floor and in the bedrooms. In the parlor, the little old piano would begin to play all by itself. They heard the sound of footsteps climbing the empty stairs. Sometimes Mrs. Mackenzie's old rocking chair would start rocking all on its own. On several occasions, the caretakers had a run-in with something very disturbing on the upper floors.
Phil, you back already? What are you doing? Phil? All right, what are you up to now?
Life seemed almost normal after about a year. The keepers at last were beginning to feel comfortable in the house. Then, on a winter night in 1958, they went through an experience so traumatic, they moved out of their rent-free lodging at 82 Bond Street the very next day. The caretakers occupied a small flat on the third floor. The tiny bedroom was a little cramped, but cozy. Also, it was one of the few rooms in the house where nothing unusual or strange took place. But that night, in spite of the wood stove burning brightly in the corner, the temperature started going down.
Honey? What is it? Are you all right?
According to the affidavits signed by the caretakers, the image over the bed appeared several times and struck at least one other person. The next day, in both cases, 3 distinct welts were visible. Shortly after the historical board took over, things seemed to settle down. The current curators will quite honestly tell you that nothing out of the ordinary happens in the old house, but then they don't stay there at night. 131 Hazelton Avenue, on the edge of the Yorkville district. It has been haunted for some time by the ghost of a woman I've chosen to call the Harlequin ghost. The structure is an old Victorian residence, converted to practical office space. Where the parlor was once, there is now an elegant office. The upstairs bedrooms are workshops, and the basement is a recording studio. To the casual observer, it would appear that the building has been completely renewed. But something or someone from its past still lives there. An employee of the recording studio decided to come in early one morning and get an early start. He was one of the few who had a key to the house.
Hey, Ben, you here already? Hey, Tim, you up there? Tim?
On several occasions, a woman has been seen, usually at the attic window. People who work here say they have felt her presence in and around the office. Curiously, the men who've seen the ghost insist she's young and beautiful, while the women say she appears old and haggard. Ben McPeak Jr. and his brother Jerome, who own the recording studio, have had several encounters with the ghost. She's been known to scatter objects and knock over records which have been carefully stacked. Like some character from a Gothic novel, this apparently friendly spirit doesn't seem to want to leave. Maybe she's the original owner. This is Toronto's old City Hall by night. Completed around the turn of the century, it is a magnificent architectural reminder of another age. According to an old newspaper article, some people believe it's haunted by the ghosts of murderers tried there and condemned to hang. At night, they say, the killer's restless spirits prowl the upstairs corridors. On a busy night, as many as 50. Some seem interested in judges. The judiciary are not the only ones who have had strange encounters here. The maintenance department has had complaints from people working the night shift. On several occasions, they claim to have witnessed something unusual on the upper floors.
Nick, is that you?
The strangest things seem to have happened in courtroom 33, where the sentence of death by hanging was passed on some of this country's most notorious murderers.
Nick. Hey, I thought you was off. Hey. Who are you? What are you doing in here?
Looking at the old hall at night, thinking of the judges who came in contact here with something strange and unexplained, I find myself half grinning at the prospect of debunking these ghost stories. How do you look a judge squarely in the eye and tell him he's imagining things? Still, with the reassuring sound of traffic and the streetlights, it looks like just an empty old building at night, doesn't it? Here, amid the study of arts, science, and commerce on the U of T campus, stands University College, the oldest structure on the grounds, and a monument to the work of Frederick Cumberland, one of the greatest architects of the 19th century. There are more than 2,700 students enrolled here. In these busy and serious surroundings, a pale man, wearing what appear to be grimy work clothes, has been seen wandering the empty corridors, apparently slamming doors and rattling things. Once, an unsuspecting student shared a glass of scotch with this man, only to watch him disappear before his very eyes. The man is the University College ghost. Construction on the college began in 1854 and was completed in 1857. The work was all done by hand, with a swarm of people operating cranes, winches, and wagons. In this crew were Ivan Reznikov and Paul Diabolos, two stonemasons. They worked together carving the gargoyles which lined the roundhouse and the arcade. Reznikov and Diabolos were rivals, the rivalry involving Susie, Reznikov's girlfriend. On a winter's day in 1858, Reznikov was tipped off that Diabolos was seeing his beloved Susie in secret.
Hey, you're looking all dressed up for going home.
I'm not going home yet.
No?
No. No, I've got plans for an evening out.
Oh, I see. Hey, enjoy yourself, eh?
I will.
Just before midnight, as the informer promised, Susie and Diabolos came walking past the college.
I suppose.
Hello, Paul. How are you this evening? I see you've met my darling Susan.
What are you doing here?
I was a little restless, so I thought I would go for a walk.
Ivan, we just happened to meet not 5 minutes ago, purely by chance.
I wasn't talking to you. I think you should keep very, very quiet.
Why don't we just stop?
That's right, my friend. I think we should.
What are you
Ivan,
doing?
no! Ivan!
My friend, Paul! That's right. My friend, Paul!
Diabolos buried the body in the loose earth at the base of the main tower. No one seriously questioned the absence of Reznikov, since many of the men hired to work on the college construction were transients. Not until 32 years later was evidence of the murder uncovered. After the fire of 1890, during cleanup operations, this skull was discovered at the foot of the tower. It was later identified as that of Ivan Reznikov. A silver buckle and human bones were found, which now lie in the northeast corner of the courtyard in an unmarked grave. Not everyone has seen the pale man in grimy work clothes wandering in the empty corridors of University College. Some may argue that he is a figment of the imagination. But I invite you to walk in the silent halls on some cold winter night. And as you approach the heavy oak door leading to the arcade, take notice of the 3 marks made by the axe of Ivan Reznikov on that long ago winter night in 1858. And as you leave, look up on the corner wall by the round house. There are 2 gargoyles carved by Paul Diabolos, one whose expression is contorted in agony, while the other laughs gleefully. The resemblance is said to be striking. Oh, by the way, bring a flask with you. Scotch, I think. Ivan likes Scotch. Still not convinced, are you? Of course. It's better to be a skeptic. Better to find an explanation, something scientific and rational. And there are many possible answers which might do. Some plausible theory which will make the idea of ghosts and hauntings fade away. But some night, when you're home alone, safe and secure in the warmth of your bedroom, with the gentle tapping of rain on the roof, you may hear something that seems out of place. A faint scratching sound just outside your window. Don't say we didn't warn you. This is Fred Napoli. Good night. to sleep safely and soundly, secure in the knowledge that what we believe to be real is real, that what we see is there, that anything which does not conform to these rules, like a bad dream, will be gone by morning. It's a nice thought, a comforting thought, but it isn't always true.
Well, I hope it works out. Yeah, right. Don't worry about me. I'll be fine. Yeah, really. I love you, too. Miss you, honey. Oh, call me tomorrow morning, okay? Okay, good night.
Audrey Cook is alone. Her husband, Jim, is away on business again, but his nightly calls make the loneliness easier to bear. Audrey has purposely put a lot of effort into decorating this second-story bedroom. On account of Jim's job, she'll be alone a lot for a while. There's something comforting and warm about a cozy bedroom to relax in at the end of the day. She will almost immediately, although reluctantly, drift off to sleep, wishing that Jim was home. On this particular night, something will disturb her sleep. When you close a window, by the normal laws of gravity, it should remain closed. But for 3 nights in a row, Audrey Cook was awakened in the middle of the night by unusual, strange sounds, and in each instance found the previously closed window wide open. On the phone, Jim has offered a handy explanation to put her mind at rest. It sounds reasonable. Older houses like this one have counterweights in the walls to control the upward movement of the windows. What is probably happening here is a case of temperature and humidity combining in just the right proportions to cause the weights to move a little, thereby allowing the window to ease upward and open. Jim has solved the problem. Audrey is installing a simple latch from his workbench, thereby ending the annoyance. At least, this is what she is hoping. Audrey Cook doesn't know the tragic tale of this locked second-story window. Once, two teenage girls shared this bedroom. Their stern father had forbidden one of them to see a certain young man. With no other way to get out, the girl would exit by the bedroom window and shinny down the old elm tree at night, returning later with her sister's help, undetected. One night, in a terrible storm, the younger sister closed the window to keep out the rain and fell asleep while waiting. She never heard her siblings' frantic pounding on the window, nor did she see her lose her grip and fall to her death. Billy Hester is a traveling furniture salesman from Kingston, Ontario, who has just closed a major deal in Cambridge, and he's on his way to lock up another in Stratford. By tomorrow, back at head office, he will be the new golden-haired boy. Everything is going exactly as he planned, except he's not sure of the road ahead. He may have taken a wrong turn somewhere. But this wrong turn will contain a golden opportunity. For Billy Hester, a traveling salesman's fantasy is about to come to life.
Hi.
Hello.
Hi. Are you all right?
Yes, why?
Well, just coming down the road here. This is my car. And I saw you sitting on the rock, and, well, you just looked a little out of place, that's all. I mean, it is pretty here, but it's desolate. It is in the middle of nowhere, and you're by yourself. I'm sorry, look, I'm babbling on here. I'm going into Stratford. I was wondering if you'd like a lift.
Maybe.
Well, which way are you headed?
Same direction.
All right. Well, do you want to ride?
I don't think so.
Billy Hester eventually found his way back to the main road. He was mildly confused by his unusual encounter, but not unhappily so.
I changed my mind.
In 1956, on the night of her school prom, a lovely golden-haired girl was abandoned by her date on this deserted road. She had the misfortune of hitching a ride from which she would never return. Now, she waits patiently for someone else to offer her a ride they will never forget. This quaint little house is located on Bleecker Crescent in Listowel, Ontario. The downstairs flat is empty now, except for the boxes of mementos, keepsakes, and memories of 6 years of belonging to someone. Jennifer Bailey, the new tenant, has separated from her husband, Ted, and now she must begin again, alone. For the moment, the memories are sweet, if a little painful. And with each piece unwrapped, a small comfort returns. The vase is not valuable in monetary terms, but priceless in real value, because it belonged to Ted's grandmother and was given to them as their first wedding gift, when the future seemed so promising, so certain. The vase should have shattered when it hit the floor. That by itself was an extraordinary piece of luck. To land on its base and remain standing, this seemed more than luck. There was something very different about this house. And over the next few days, there would be more strange occurrences. Jennifer had forgotten a hot iron left on to answer the phone. She returned later to find the iron off, the electric cord neatly wound around the appliance. Windows left open the night before, she awoke to find closed and locked. Plants and flowers, well on their way to dying, were now suddenly thriving and in full bloom. At this stage in her new life, Jennifer has not yet found her rhythm, and there isn't any time to look for it, since she cannot be late for a job interview. Her previous employment ended in a personality conflict with the manager. She really needs this job. The mess will have to wait. Later that day, Jennifer arrived home distraught. The rushing and hoping had been in vain. She didn't get the job. Every plate, glass, spoon, and fork had been washed and neatly put away. The floor and counters were spotless. Her favorite mug, which she had left half full of coffee that morning, was now clean and dry, the spoon beside it, as if waiting for her.
But why don't you think it's a good idea?
Later that night, Jennifer received the phone call she hoped would never come. It was Ted. He had something to tell her concerning their trial separation. He wanted it to end. Finally, he had decided he wanted a divorce.
Why? No! Ted, please! No! Let's just talk! Please, let's just get together and we'll talk about it. Oh, no, please.
Hours later, emotionally drained, Jennifer was trying to come to terms with her loss, trying to accept it. But the melody from the little music box Ted had fashioned for her with his own hands made it impossible. For the first time in her life, she was truly alone. At her darkest moment, Jennifer Bailey was seeing with her own eyes someone else who knew what it meant to be truly alone. The long-deceased occupant of this house became a young widow barely 2 weeks after marrying and lived on alone for 60 years until her death. She understood Jennifer's need and would be there to comfort her as long as she was needed, if only in spirit. In the mid-1960s, recording studio executive Ron Secker moved into a second-floor apartment in this house on Walmer Road in Toronto. He shared the flat with a friend who was mostly out of town. A couple of weeks after moving in, while his friend was away, Ron Secker had an encounter with something very unusual.
What are you doing in here? Excuse me. Excuse me. Hey, look, pal, I don't know how you got in here, but I think you're in the wrong apartment. Hey, I'm talking to you. Now, why don't you and your friend just run along, you know? I don't want to call the cops on you. Just go on, just get out of here.
With the passage of several weeks, Ron Secker's strange encounter with an old man and his little dog was fading from his mind as he leaned toward the idea that it was just a dream. He went to bed somewhat relieved one night when he was again alone, but his relief proved to be short-lived. Ron Secker would be the first to volunteer a rational explanation for the shocking death scene at the foot of his bed in the upstairs flat of this house on Walmer Road. But he can't find one. You see, he knew nothing about the old man and the dog when he moved in, and didn't learn of the suicide until much later. Perhaps the old man with his little dog, who died a few days later of sorrow for his master, just wanted someone to care that his life had ended so tragically. Ron Secker doesn't know, but he is now a very light sleeper. Ghosts, specters, and phantoms are for storybooks, bad dreams, and Halloween nights. Monsters and boogeymen don't belong in the real world. But sometimes they forget.
Stories you are about to see are true. They involve the experiences of 7 people whose perception of the natural order of things has been radically changed. In October of 1983, Richard and Dana Statler purchased this quaint farmhouse just east of Ajax, Ontario. Although they weren't in the market for a new house, upon seeing this one, they quickly changed their minds. And given that it was an estate sale, the price was too good to pass up. An added advantage was that much of its furnishings were included in the deal, as the sellers had no use for them. On October 22nd, Richard and Dana took possession of their new home and moved in. Richard took some time off and helped Dana get the place organized. Everything about their new home seemed perfect until one night a couple of weeks later. It was Richard's first night back at work, as he worked the night shift at a local warehouse. Dana never complained about his shift, but Richard always felt somewhat guilty about leaving Dana home alone at night.
You gonna be all right?
Yes, I'll be fine.
You sure?
Oh, Rick, please. You're gonna be late.
All right, well, try and get some sleep, okay?
I will. Just leave the hall light on, all right?
I'll see you in the morning.
Night. Rick? Rick?
Over the next 3 nights, Dana awoke to find the hall light off and no one in sight. Annoyed and somewhat worried about this, she had Richard replace the hall light switch, despite his protests that there was nothing wrong with it. This seemed to do it, and for the next 2 nights, Dana slept soundly. But not on the third.
Rick, I don't know what is going on, but there's something up in that room.
Oh, for God's sakes, Dana, would you listen to yourself?
You still don't believe me, do you?
Dana, please.
No, Rick, listen. Either you get your shift changed or we move out of this house, all right?
Richard changed his shift. For the first few days, everything seemed to be all right. Then, on the night of November the 12th, Dana encountered something quite unusual in her new bedroom.
This bed, back against the wall, where it belongs. Do you understand me?
The next morning, without explanation, Dana instructed Richard to move the bed back to its original position. The bed, like most of the furnishings in the bedroom, had belonged to the previous owner. That night, Dana went to bed feeling that it wasn't over yet, and it wasn't. Dana had been visited by the former owner of this house, Dora Trump McKay. In her research a few days later, Dana learned that the spinster lady had spent her entire adult life here alone. Dora Trump McKay was possessed by an idea which became her obsession, a place for everything, and everything in its place might well have been her epitaph. One day, in a fit of rage, she lashed out at her cleaning lady, lost her balance, and fell. A short time later, she died alone here, the way she wanted it.
Dan Benoit.
The old Massey House in downtown Toronto. In 1882, Hart Massey, president of the Massey Manufacturing Company, bought this house and renamed it Euclid Hall. The large Gothic revival house remained in the family until 1915, when it was turned over to Victoria College. Since then, it has been a convalescent home, an office, an art gallery, and finally, a restaurant. Today, the Keg restaurant chain has made the old Massey House their headquarters. Inside, the splendor of old Victorian, Art Nouveau, and Gothic architecture still enchants its visitors. Though there have been many alterations over the years, the house still retains its classic charm. But the old Massey House has retained something else. Past residents and visitors have told of unusual noises after hours. Voices and footsteps on the upper floors. Doors opening and closing by themselves. Chairs and tables that drag about on their own. And faces hiding in dark corners. During the last decade since the Keg took over, several of its employees quit suddenly when they could no longer stand the sounds of phantom footsteps and ghostly rumblings, the sensation of cold chills in the empty rooms. It was only a year ago when one of the waitresses came in early to get things underway. She was all alone in the house at the time, so far she knew. Two weeks later, one of the Massey family's descendants paid the restaurant a visit. The waitress overheard him tell of the night when one of the Massey boys had a terrible argument with his father. In a fit of anger, the boy dragged his father's favorite chair across the upper hall and tried to push it out the back window. The waitress resigned a few days later. Not long after, one of the restaurant's managers had a rather unusual experience. It was his turn to open up, and while making his rounds, he encountered an unexpected visitor.
You put the shama-lama, baby, in my rama-lama ding-dong. You put the oom-mow-mow back into my smile, child. That is why. That is why. How'd you get in here?
Come and get me.
Hey, come back here. Come back here right now, kid. Hey, come back here right now. Hey.
Hello.
Come here. Hey. All right, come here. Now, down here, right now. Come down here. No, I'm just joking. Come here, all right? Okay.
The little boy is said to be the spirit of one of the Massey children who, because of their father's staunch Methodist beliefs, wasn't allowed to play or have fun. Evidently, he does now.
Very funny, Murphy. Now take the breadsticks out of your mouth. Come on. Cut it out. You're not gonna spook me with this haunted house crap.
Murphy. What? What are you looking at?
What? What now?
Nothing. Nothing.
There is a legend that in 1908, on the day Eliza Massey died, her loyal and devoted maid, in her grief, took a rope and hung herself here in the main foyer. Today, some claim to have heard choking noises. They have seen her hanging in the central stairwell. But the strangest fact is that not one of all these people who shared the same vision knew anything about the maid or her suicide. The unhappiness of a child forbidden to play. A grief-stricken maid who hung herself on the day her mistress died. Such things do not a peaceful house make, even when they are all dead. High on the Niagara Escarpment, just north of Hamilton, there is an old airfield. Its hangars house one of Canada's finest collections of vintage aircraft. The Canadian warplane heritage has made its home here in the hangars which once housed the aircraft and trained the men who would take them into battle. Today, a number of aircraft are on display here, along with this classic Avro Lancaster, which is being completely restored. It is a very special museum because all the aircraft still fly, and the ones that don't are being restored to their former glory. But staff members will tell you that the painstaking restorations, in some cases, seem to have worked better than expected.
Hey, did you kick that wrench over? Hey, good, thanks. Hey! Ah. Hey, come on, you're not allowed in there, you know? I'm working down here, can't you see that?
In the far corner of the main display hangar, other mechanics have heard the sound of phantom footsteps. Staff members and visitors alike claim to have seen shadows and images moving through the darkened areas of the hangar. Voices have been heard when there is obviously no one there.
Guys, this is really heavy. I'm gonna leave it here, okay? Guys?
When the staff member went to the spot where the pilots were seen talking, there was no one there. But the crate had been moved somehow.
Okay. No, this isn't funny.
There are no satisfactory explanations to account for occasions when things move about all by themselves. Thermal flight boots, 1940s issue, are seen casually strolling about between the planes. Voices emanating from who knows where are heard discussing the aircraft, making detailed flight plans. For those who tend to these ancient aircraft, and those who come to look at and admire these relics of another age, there is a feeling that goes beyond words. Sometimes the feeling is eerie. When these birds were new and the enemy was known, there was no way to know who'd be coming back. Some didn't make it. Or did they? Perhaps having seen these true tales of hauntings, you remain a skeptic. More than likely, nothing will happen to change your mind. But some night, in the middle of the night, when you hear something that shouldn't be there, when you feel the room suddenly grow cold, it won't be so easy to be so sure, especially if you are all alone.